is, if you don't have an admin, you are the admin. So,
right.
If you're charging, let's say, $200 an hour to do a detailed job on a car, then why are you doing a $10 an hour task?
Detailers Roadmap Cruise Control, where we navigate the roadways of life, business, and everything in between. Hey guys, it's Kevin Davis from the Cruise Control Podcast, brought to you by Detailers Roadmap. Today I'm going to be here with Joshua. You told me. Monge. Joshua, I got it. Joshua, I'm going to be here today with Joshua Monge. And I'm excited because this is another one of these episodes to where we're bringing in people from outside of our industry that can speak into our industry because they're experts in particular items of business and strategy and exits and all of these different things. And I think this is going to be a super interesting episode. So I hope you'll stick around and listen to it. Before we get going, don't forget that you can go to detailsroadmap.com, click on that little book a demo button at the top. We do websites, SEO, all of it's awesome, kick ass. We've got the best team in the industry. So check that out. Go to detailsroadmap.com and click that little book a demo button. Joshua is a fractional COO and fractional executive. Joshua helps business owners get their business to a place where it can scale and grow. He's a seasoned entrepreneur, currently managing a digital marketing systems firm and an operations consulting firm. He works on business operations audits, operations operations SOP creation, which we talk a ton about, process mapping, and also acts as a fractional COO. And according to your LinkedIn, Joshua, you're from Tulsa.
So I just relocated, but yes, that's where I was.
He was in Tulsa. I grew up in Oklahoma, about 90 miles. I was from Stillwater, so about 90 miles.
Oh my gosh.
90 miles from Tulsa.
That says a lot about you, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know if it's good or bad, depending on, if you're not from a state that has use of the word bedlam. Okay. In Oklahoma, there's more than two, but there's essentially two schools: Oklahoma State, Oklahoma University, the Sooners, and the Cowboys. And bedlam is a big word. If you don't know what that looks like, look it up, and you can see videos on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. So, but to my credit, my grandfather went to Oklahoma A&M in the 40s, so it was all of us went to Oklahoma State. So that's kind of how we went. So I'm presuming that you were a Sooner fan then. So
I'm actually agnostic in sports, but I knew very carefully to see which way the wind was blowing in any of the social circles, because then it was like, oh, you guys are that. That's what I'm totally for that.
There you go. So, hey, thanks for coming on board. I was super excited when you reached out because I was like, man, this would be great. And you said, hey, I think I can bring value to the audience. So I'm 100% sure in looking at everything that you do that actually is the case. Yeah. So the first thing that we always do on this podcast is to ask about the superhero backstory. And that's kind of our nickname for it. Really, it's just a matter of like, how did you get where you're at? Because people are like, first of all, we'll have to explain what a fractional COO is. We've had fractional CFOs.
They have an easy job, by the way.
On this. Yeah. So, a fractional is like the fancy buzzword now for part-time. Basically, and so when you say I'm a part-time COO, you get to charge X number of dollars. And then if you say fractional CEO, you multiply that by a factor.
Yes.
Right. It's that kind of
it's that the F makes it all fancier. So it's
right. Yeah. We like it. So, hey, give me that backstory. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. I really wish there was like a radioactive spider or something like that. That would be way more interesting. That would be awesome. When I hear superhero, but, basically, I got into fractional COO work because my previous career, full-time job I was the director of economic development for a chamber. I did that for 3 years. I helped local businesses stay and grow in the area. And we got to the place where in 2020, I was looking for an exit. And so February 2020, I was going to walk into a manufacturing facility. I was going to be the new COO. 10 million in revenue, about 40 employees. The money people wanted me in there because they had a CEO that the business grew really fast. And the guy was taking vacations and skydiving and dune bugging and basically got in a really bad accident. And so they didn't have a number two. And so they needed a number two guy. So I was excited to walk into that. But it was February of 2020. I don't know about you guys, but February 2020 is not a great time to do career transition.
Yeah, 100%.
And so they were like, hey, listen, we're going to put you on hold. We basically want to see how this COVID thing is going to blow over, and then we'll get back to you.
We'll get back to you in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah,
like that was the story.
Yeah, I didn't even call 2 years later. I was like, wait, what's going on? So I found myself basically without work, and I was like, man, what am I going to do? I saw everybody going online, and I used to own a digital agency, and so I was like, man, people really need help with SEO. I don't like the industry. I don't like the way it's being approached or done. Secret sauce, magic potions, all of that. Like, let me just do audits. Let me show everybody what needs to be done and come up with a real clear price point and get that launched. Well, within 18 months, I got that to 6 figures. And a buddy of mine that I knew from my chamber days, he said, Joshua, you used to help businesses. Like, you should get back to doing that. I was like, well, how do I do that? And still, my family likes to eat and have a roof over their head. Like, how do I make that work? And so he said, hey, you should look at being a fractional COO. And I was like, well, what is that? And he's like, basically, you come in, you help set up the operations, you help the CEOs get their visions realized, help them get their cash flow, operations all kind of organized. Do that on a part-time basis. And I thought, you know what, cool, yeah, let me do that. So I hung a shingle up, and I was actually at a conference doing a presentation about SEO, and I talked to a interior designer that was having a lot of trouble. She was growing, but she was failing from the success. All that complexity in the business was all falling on her, and she was kind of a little bit stressed out by it. And so I was like, well, have you done an org chart? Have you done this? Have you done this? And she's like, no, I need to do that. So she's like, hey, why don't you come on board? So there was my first client. And so basically just met more people and got more connections. And so we built that up to Think, Adapt, Build. And we have kind of a systems and way of approaching things to help build that operational component that you need once you get to a certain place to keep your business on a positive growth trajectory.
That's a really cool way to do that, because I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I actually have served in that capacity where you come in, you look at strategy, you look at issues, you say, okay, here's the plan, here's what we're doing. And one of my roles at Detailers Roadmap is actually director of revenue development, which is some of the operations stuff, but it's more that big picture stuff, right. Like, what are we looking at with processes and communications and those kind of things. And the cool thing about that, I've had conversations with other entrepreneurs, and you yourself being an entrepreneur, if you were just in a COO job, right, like you would probably get bored very quickly.
Oh my gosh.
Because you've just doing the same thing all the time. Well, being a fractional COO allows you to basically take that entrepreneurial thing and continue to do what, in my opinion, is the best part about being an entrepreneur, is the creation, the challenge, the problem solving, and all. Is that something kind of that you see?
Yeah. I mean, I like project work, right? And then as entrepreneurs, there is a point where you kind of get bored, you're like, okay, this is running. And I've been putting out fires for the last few years, or I'm constantly, the point person for everything. And once you get all of that stuff out of the way, then you're sitting there going, okay, now what do I do? And I've actually worked with a few folks. They try to pick up matches and gas, and they try to go set things on fire. And I'm like, no, it's working. You don't need to break it. Like the behavior and patterns that you got here, let's break those. And then going forward, great. Now you're the CEO of a business that runs without you. Enjoy that. And then, leverage that to the next thing you want to do. And so for myself, being a fractional means that not only do I have an experience of just my own practice, but I've been in several other businesses. And so my learning curve and knowledge that I've been gaining, it's kind of accelerated because I'm not just a consultant for one person. I'm in the driver's seat multiple times, shifting hats and getting into those businesses and helping people navigate the waters of, growing their business. So it's fun and exciting. And my full-time business is the business of helping other people run their businesses.
I love that. That's a great gig, and it's probably super fun.
Oh, so fun. Some days though, I'm just like, man.
I mean, some days are, as always, some days are better than others for sure.
Yeah.
I know you work typically with like mid 6 figures into 7 and 8 figure businesses, right? Like you're running these big organizations. But I think back to your first client, who is basically probably in the same scenario that most, a good portion of our listeners are, which are single operators, or small companies, 1 or 2 employees underneath them. They're wearing gajillion hats.
Yeah,
Most of them
hat.
that we talk to have limited SOPs, or they're still trying to put SOPs together. They have limited strategy. It's that technician versus, that technician mindset from E-Myth Revisited versus the business owner, all of those things, right? Can you, I think it would be really interesting if we just took this fictional detailing business, temp business, PPF, Flat Glass, these kind of companies that we work with in the automotive space, and kind of walk through what you would tell them, like how would you help them evaluate and audit where they're at, and then some of these initial steps, because I think really that'll provide a ton of value to help these guys and girls who are running these businesses.
Yeah, so I think first thing I would do is, a lot of founder-led service-based businesses is tell them, well, why did you get into this? Like, what made you start this? I would imagine that, detailers, they probably worked for somebody else, or they had a job and then they really enjoy this. Maybe it was a hobby or a side thing they did, and then they decided to do this on their own. Great. So that's what you're passionate about. So then what part of the business do you really enjoy, and what part do you really want to if you had to do nothing else but just focus on that one piece, like, could you do that? And so if it's for starting it up or growing it or whatever, great. So all the rest of that, how do we get other people to do it? Or how do we build this in a way that you're not the sole person to provide everything? You're not the sole person that everything has to come through and clear through. And but that's a hard thing to do because they started off and they're having success. And so the second part to this then is, okay, now that you have a business and it's working and you succeeded, treat it like a business, get it organized like a business, set it up to grow and be on a trajectory with all the proper business things in place, right? So I think a lot of the folks probably hire a bookkeeper right away to help keep the books straight. Then they might hire a lawyer to make sure the documents are filed correctly. And then, they'll get a finance person that will help kind of understand revenue and projections and everything else so they can buy the first piece of equipment, or they can prove to a bank that I have the documentation in place and this business is going to grow, and so they can keep buying equipment and pieces. So
I like how you assume that these businesses are doing all of those things.
I said treat it like a business, so that's where I'm like, that's why I'm saying so there's a roadmap.
Let's take a step back and assume that a lot of these guys and gals are running their businesses pretty lean.
Yeah.
And they're actually not doing those things because they're trying to do all of them themselves. Right. Like, because, and, I'm a big fan of Dan Martell. He talks about, buy back your time and all those. And, but I think, and I'll admit readily, this was me. I have a bunch of different brands, but early, and I keep this card, I can see it from here, and I've said this on the podcast. It literally says Chief Do Everything Guy on my business card underneath my name. And this is one of the dumbest ideas that I ever, like, that whole idea
title
is stupid. Yeah, the title's stupid.
People are like,
I think there's a fear-based component to where, do I really need to spend $1,000 on a bookkeeper? Can I afford $750 an hour for an attorney? How do I get, what I mean? Like walking through all those things. So, I'm not trying to call you out. I'm just saying that I think if we look at this particular service-based, and I think a lot of service-based industries are very similar to this, especially small ones. So let's back up a step and tell these people what should that look like? If you don't currently have XYZ in place, these are the first things you need to get into place.
Well, I think, okay, so then kind of take a step back, definitely, proof of product, right? Or proof of service. So that the fact that, you got your first job, great. Can you keep those jobs, or can you keep that referral base going? Great. Then definitely secure your pipeline. So then make sure you have your website in order, make sure you have all your marketing in order. Because at that point, you don't want to invest too much in operations per se, because you're trying to stay lean and you're just trying to make sure you're feeding your pipeline. But once you have a consistent workflow and you've got a backlog of clients, that's something where then, okay, now how can I systematize this, or how can I create processes to make this work? And so that's where you would look at maybe automating some of your lead generation stuff or lead cultivation components. I have found that a lot of service-based businesses, when they're like struggling to make things work, first question is, well, how often are you answering the phone? Oh, well, I'm busy doing the job, so I don't have a way to answer the phone. Well, then that's business that you're losing. So then take the value of that business lost, right? Look at what it would cost to have someone answer the phone for you. And then all you have to do is pick up 1 or 2 more jobs. That probably covers the cost of getting the phone answered. So
yeah, our CEO Chris, CEO / president Chris, he literally loves to call sites, what we call our partners, detail businesses and see whether or not they answer the phone, and then he'll post on the group, be like, I called 12 shops today and 1 person answered. And that's like, it's because they're busy, because they're trying to do all these hats. So that's a great one, is to get the staff in place to at least answer the phone.
And then the other one is, and I borrowed this from Cody Sanchez, is, if you don't have an admin, you are the admin. So,
right.
If you're charging, let's say, $200 an hour to do a detailed job on a car, then why are you doing a $10 an hour task?
This episode is brought to you by Detailer's Roadmap. Hey, spoiler alert, that's us. We all know you need a kick-ass website in order to be successful with your business. The good news is, at Detailer's Roadmap, kick-ass websites, that's kind of what we do. With the latest performance, designs, and SEO strategies, Detailer's Roadmap is your one-stop shop to be successful on the web. And don't forget, we have the best support team in the industry. Whether you're an existing partner looking to improve your lead generation, or you need a brand new website, Detailer's Roadmap is here to help you be successful on the web. So go to detailersroadmap.com/success and get started today. That's detailersroadmap.com/SUCCESS.
$15 an hour task. That's 1 more car you could be working on. And so when they said they can't afford it, I would say, well, let's look at how you have your business organized and structured, and then find an opportunity to basically take those administrative tasks, write that job description, then go hire somebody that's going to do that exact thing. And you already know what that cost is going to be. Great. So then take those extra hours you get back and then go fill those slots with, 1 or 2 more jobs. You've now paid for your admin person, and you've taken all that administrative work off your plate. And I have to say, like, service-based businesses, there's 1,000, like you said, 1,000 hats that you're wearing. That's all sitting in your head. Well, half that stuff's now gone because the admin's taking care of it.
Yeah, hiring. At first, she was what I called a virtual assistant, and she actually is a virtual assistant for me. But we changed her role. She went full time with me to be and I said, I'm changing your role and the number of hours you work, and I'm changing your title. You are now my executive assistant.
Yeah.
Right, because that gave her more ownership as to what I do. But dude, I mean, she handles my email, she handles my calendar, she does all of that stuff for me.
Yeah.
And if I spent all the time that she spends, she's 40 or 50 hours a week. That's a lot of time I get back. And I don't pay, like, the amount of money that it would cost me to do that 40 or 50 hours a week is ridiculous compared to what I pay her.
Yeah.
Right.
And you only had to work a few hours to cover the cost on that. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's kind of those are the first elements and components of that. And then the next part is, and I know a lot of people that I met with in the service-based business, they're like, well, I am the business. There is no IP, or I can't sell it because it's just me. I'm going to say you're wrong. Like, I'm just going to throw it right out there. Your checklist that you use, how you follow up with people, how you thank them, what you buy and how you put it together, all of that's all processes that you could put together, whether it's a checklist. So, and I would say start there. Start with checklist to say, when somebody calls you, what do you do? And then write a checklist of what you do. When you show up to the job site, what do? You write checklist. And so those checklists now become IP, or intellectual property, that if you ever wanted to sell your business, you're actually not just selling a job, but you're selling it how it gets done. So
yeah. And what a lot of people don't realize when you start talking about franchises, right? Like, franchisees are not really there's a brand that they're purchasing into, but a good bit of what they're purchasing is the process and SOP that they know, the recipe, so to speak.
Exactly.
That's there. You get the full recipe to follow. So that's one of the biggest parts of the value of paying for your franchise fees all the time. Not that you're going to take your small detail business and franchise it, who knows?
I mean, maybe one day somebody will listen to this and they'll be like, this was the episode that made it happen.
There you go. It comes up with a unique idea. However, to Joshua's point, it's really having those checklists that become your business. And that's like, all right, so now you can hand it over to someone else for a fee or royalties or however you decide to structure that deal. But that's really what you're getting.
Yeah. And then kind of going to the plan that I was trying to lay out to the people, then is you hire your first employee that could be a detailer that isn't going to work as fast as you, isn't going to be as, gung-ho, but they're going to have a clear checklist of what they need to do. And, they can start following that. And then you can get feedback from them on how to refine that checklist to get other people to do it. So.
And you can actually use, we've been talking, I had a friend of mine who's an expert in AI. And one of the things that I know that, and we didn't talk about this on the episode, but one of the things I know you can use AI for is to fill in the gaps, to help fill in the gaps on some of this stuff. I'm doing I've been working on creating a book, which includes a bunch of stories, but then has some concepts. And so I end up throwing it into ChatGPT and saying, look, what stories am I missing? What kind of stories am I missing in order to hit all the concepts? And so it spit out for me what stories that I needed to do. So you can put out an SOP for doing an interior, right? Or whatever. And you can say, okay, this is my current checklist. What steps am I missing? Or how could I communicate this checklist better to make it as efficient as possible, right? So don't feel like you have to do all of this just from your brain by, watching. And I do recommend you video what you do.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily have to do this all on your own.
Right. And I think that's where, and there is a little bit of fear component with this, when you think about trying to hire somebody and have somebody do this and trust them, because I don't know, let's say that you're working on an $80,000 car, right? And you don't want to accidentally misplace a bolt or strip a, do something if you take the seats out and all that whole 9 yards. You would really hate for somebody to mess that up and then you're on the hook for it. But the reality is, if you're only going to make as much money as you're doing the actual work, and where the profits are and real opportunity is getting other people to work for you. And so the administrative stuff is probably low risk, but then eventually, you want a small crew probably at some point to help you execute. So having those things in place and trying it and testing it before you add 20, 30 people or 5 or 10 people, it's a good thing. So.
Yeah. Let me just take this opportunity to point out, you should have great garage keepers and liability insurance going on in your business right now, just to make sure that in case something happens, that's covered. However, to your point, that trust factor, I think, is a really big one. What advice do you typically give? Like, how do I know when to hire my first, the admin and bookkeeping side that's easy. That's low hanging fruit, right?
Right.
But, I talked to a lot of people, and we've talked to them on this podcast too. It's like, hey, when am I supposed to hire? Like, how do I know when to hire this person? How do I make that leap? Do I have to have the cash? And I want you to talk about cash flow with that.
Yeah.
But do I have to have the cash first, or do I hire them knowing I have enough cash that they will make it for me along the way? Like, how does that, what is that process? What recommendations do you give for that process?
So I don't know about you, but I have kids. And so people always ask, like, when's the right time to have kids? I'm like, I don't know. When you have the kid, when you hire the employee, I would say you definitely want to hire them a little bit later than probably you think. Because if you hire them too early, then you're taking on that cost, and then it adds a whole level of stress. So, when you're at a place where you're answering the phone, but you can't get to all the jobs, and there's a wait list, and you obviously have a backlog, that's definitely on the later side of it. And trying to get somebody on board while you have a backlog, I know that's probably going to stress you out, but at least then that you've got the jobs lined up and you're ready to go. But I know a lot of entrepreneurs wrestle with managing priorities, and so trying to hire at that time might be a little crazy.
Unless you have good checklists and SOPs in place already, so that you can hand those off, right?
Great. Then when that person shows up, maybe you have them do all the prep work. Oh, here, probably have all the prep work and everything that's not actually physically touching the car, that you would then reduce all that risk. If you can have them do all of that piece to it and be a kind of an aid or a helper, maybe that's then you can bring them in that way. Thanks for helping me solve that. But as far as, cash flow wise, you really should probably talk to a finance person about that, because they're going to give you some formula of how much revenue you're making and everything else. If I think in the ideal circumstance, if you actually had money saved and you actually had 6 months worth of expenses already kind of stocked away, then you could take that risk to invest in a new employee and try to expand. I would say, though, I wouldn't take on a new person until you knew that you had administrative work you could pass on and use those extra hours to do that. And then as far as additional staff and resources, you got to have a steady pipeline. I mean, you're a marketing professional that builds websites and does all for people. When do you feel like people have a good solid pipeline of leads coming in? At what point do you think, how long does that take usually to get there? Or when do you think?
It can be seasonal. That's the one thing. We're recording this in mid-February. Mm-hmm. And now is what this is when the phone starts ringing. Where are my leads? Why is my business slow? Blah, 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 blah. Right.
Right.
And I think that this is, so it becomes slightly more seasonal. So these guys may have lots of holes in their books right now.
Okay.
But hopefully in June and July, they won't have any holes in their books.
Okay.
So, I think that I was just thinking as you were talking that maybe one of the big strategies is to prepare, even if you're a single operator right now and still have, it only takes you 3 days for someone to get in to have you do their car.
Yeah.
You need to begin to plan now and build the systems in place so that when it is 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and you're at whatever that number is that you begin to feel comfortable with, then you have all of that in place. So use your and this is what I yell at these guys all the time. Why are you on Facebook in January complaining when you should be building stuff for your business that will make it easier when summer gets here and make next January better than this January? Like that tends to be the process.
Yeah. So then understanding the seasonality of that, then when things are slow, build those checklists and get the operational components in place. And then given the seasonality of it, then I would say even create job descriptions then for seasonal work. So when they show up, you're not having to spend a month to train somebody during one of your busy seasons. You can actually have maybe, some sort of graduated training program that they can go through so they can actually help you. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And if you're, is there a particular process? So, the small operator may say, look, I'm not a technical writer. Like, I don't even know how to describe what it is that I do on a car. Right. Like, and I'm sure you've heard this from some of your clients. Like, well, I know you need me to do checklists. I don't even know how to do that. Like, how do you teach people how to build their own checklists? It sounds, for someone like me, I'm super anal and very process oriented. So that comes naturally for me. But other people, it doesn't come naturally for, right? So they have to work at it.
So fortunately, there's a solution. It's called process improvement. And so the idea is like, just get something written down. And so, if your first writing it down is somebody calls me, I figure out what car they have, and then I guess, what the work is. And then I show up with a bucket of soap and, okay, great. Yeah. Now you've got a basic framework, and then go over it again. And then go over it again. And, eventually you'll start adding details and you'll start getting to the place where, okay, before I show up to the client place, like, do they have access to water? Am I bringing my own? Like, what does that look like? Maybe you look at Google Maps and see if you can actually fit your truck or your rig where it needs to go. Those kind of things, you'll start, that first iteration will be really loose, but that's the second and third ones that get better. That's one. The second one is to record yourself. Like you said, throw a recorder on and record your phone call when you talk to somebody and, what did you tell them? What did you promise them? Like, what did you say you were going to do? And then are you actually doing those things when you show up at the site to do it? And I would say even like when you're dealing with the vehicle, right? If you're in there, great. I'm walking up to the vehicle. I'm dropping my bucket. Do you start taking things apart? Do you clean out I don't know what you do. Like, do you clean out the car first or whatever? Whatever that is, just record yourself doing that. And if you don't feel comfortable recording yourself and all of that, then maybe this is something you make a small investment, have somebody, a friend, kind of come along beside you and write down what you're doing and ask you questions like, well, why are you doing that? Well, why are you doing that? And then you can write that stuff down, and then there's the beginning of your checklist. So you can retype that. And like you said, definitely leverage AI too. Throw it in there and be like, hey, GTP, this is what I do, or this is what I kind of do, or want to put together. Like, can you help me put some of this together? It'll throw up something that at least it's a framework for you to kind of start from, and then you kind of pivot. So there's three options there.
I mean, and it's iterative, right? That's a big word, but basically you have to realize that it will start in one way, it will develop into something else, and then you may give it to an employee and he's like, I quit because Because there's 137 things on this, and all I'm supposed to do is do a basic hand wash on this vehicle, right?
Yeah.
So then that's where the feedback comes in. Okay, so then you can either do it yourself or go into ChatGPT and say, how can I simplify this so that it's more easily understood, saves them, a ton of time or whatever. And so realize that over time. So I always give the example like Microsoft and Apple and anybody that does software, right?
Yeah.
It's very... If Microsoft didn't release buggy software, we'd still be on Windows 3.1, which I'm old enough to tell you that I actually used Windows 3.1, by the way, back in the very day.
I used an Apple IIe back in the day.
So nice. The full, that's awesome. But they're fine knowing that we're going to release this product and realize that it's going to need refinement. And I think that's one thing that really paralyzes a lot of people, is that they think that it needs to be perfect in order for them to even hire somebody, or what if they judge me, or what if they don't know what to do? What if they screw something up? All that.
I mean, perfection is the enemy of good. So,
yeah,
and what you're doing, I don't mean any shade or anything, but it's not rocket science. I mean,
we're not. I always say we're not curing cancer. We're making shiny paint. It's good.
But I do know that some of the more modern cars, they have less crevices and less cracks and places that stuff gets into. So those are a little bit easier to clean. But then if you're dealing with older cars or things that have different wood types and different polishes in different places, those nuances and differences, it's good to know what those are and how to deal with those. So, and that knowledge, again, if you document this stuff, this is all IP that's building your business, that's helping it being able to scale. And eventually, if you decide to sell or get out of the business, you could actually take all your notes and all your information checklists and go to somebody and be like, hey, listen, I did this. I'm going to get out of it. This is worth something. Do you want this knowledge? And then you can transfer it to them. And so you've actually got something to sell. I
like that. And I do, since we're on the subject of selling, let's use me as a 101, right? Okay. And we're going to make this up. But I'm from Kevin's Detailorama.
Oh, good name.
And I've been in business for 5 years, and I'm thinking about selling my business. What kind of problems I'm going to have for, what are the things that we talk about in terms of your ability to sell? So we know that we need IP, which is, we have been saying that's intellectual property, but so you need to have ideas that are, unique to what you're doing that you can actually have sell. And then you have other valuable items like customer lists and employees, and could be real estate, whatever you have.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest struggles I think this particular industry has is they have terrible business names.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Right? And I think that's common. You see that throughout other service-based businesses too, right?
It's because they originally started okay, I'm not a lawyer, so there's the disclaimer, go talk to the lawyers about all the lawyery stuff. But, in most states, you can usually start a business with your full name and then whatever after it, and you don't have to file a DBA. You don't have to do all of that kind of stuff. So people get started that way. Or, some states it's like $50 or $60 to file a DBA. And so they come up with something, but again, it's their name that's in it. So the weird part, if you ever go to sell, you're selling your name and the right to use your name. And so, maybe if you're Joe Smith, fine, there's a million Joe Smiths out there, but, do you really want to sell your name to wherever that's going to go?
And it's always affiliated with you as the person. You become your brand, right?
And that's, I have interior designers they've got that problem is, it's the person's name, interior design. And so when people call up and they have a problem, they want to talk to that person. Well, that person has a team of 10 people. And, the person that's actually supposed to talk to them isn't the person that's, the name on the building there. So,
and the person that's whose name is on the building is currently skydiving and mountain climbing and that kind of stuff because they've built a great team and they could do whatever they want now, right? I mean, that's the idea.
That's the ideal lifestyle. Unfortunately, I know the tea a little bit on that, and we can spill that later. But so I think so if you're in a place where you do want to grow the business, you want to do more with it, and eventually potentially exit or have the ability to exit. Definitely having a name that can transfer would be extremely helpful. And usually if you're that successful and people know you, you need to. This is where this is a hard conversation because when people are ready to sell, okay, I want to sell my business. Great. let's put a 5-year clock up and let's get everything built in 5 years to do that. I was like, no, but I'm done today. Oh gosh, you should have told us 5 years ago.
Right.
So I think building, so then basically, then to your point, you have to separate yourself from the brand, or you have to basically show that the brand can survive and run without you. And so you have to build a business and organization that runs independent of the owner. And that's where people get stuck, because they're like, well, I am the business. I'm the only one that knows everything. I'm the only one that can do everything. I'm the one that, if you're saying that multiple times, you're not going to be able to sell your business. It's going to be really hard to do that. So get it to a place where somebody else is running the day-to-day. That's a business you can sell. And so get that process going. So like you were saying, probably change the name, and then start identifying processes that are being done by other people than the owner, and build that up. And I think kind of laid out, the VA is probably the first piece, and then bookkeepers, and then, other people. You start stacking those things up. Eventually the CEO becomes the visionary. That is a business you can sell.
Yeah, that's really what you want. That's the whole premise of the E-Myth Revisited, right? Is going between being a technician and or being an owner. And yeah, and I think so, to bring that back around, if you are currently in a relatively young business, like you haven't been around, if you're, and you can evaluate this for yourself.
I say like less than 3 years, probably.
Yeah. So like if everybody, like you can say to yourself, everybody that knows me, this is Kevin's Detailerama. That's all they know about it. Well, you need to find out first of all if that's true, because it may not be true, or it may be the other way, which is it's a negative connotation. We are not branding experts. I have a branding expert that helps me with some of my brands that can walk through the branding aspect of this.
Yeah.
But if you're relatively young, or you believe that a rebrand may, if you want to sell your business in 10 years, now is the time, to start making sure that those things are in place.
Right.
The other thing about selling your business is books. Everything has to be perfect, right? Like it's much more difficult to sell than you think, which is why I actually had a conversation with a buddy of mine the other day. There's like, in the next 5 years, there's like 500,000 small businesses, successful small businesses. Like these are not dumps that will literally close their doors because either the family doesn't want it, they can't sell it, or they don't know how to sell it,
or they can't afford it. That's the other. Because a family member, right? Like, so you did great and you have all the assets and everything, but you didn't set your kids up for that success. So when they go to take over the business, you're not going to gift them a $3 million business that they get this big tax bill and there goes half the business, and then they can't afford it because they didn't have any ownership in the business at some point. I'm not trying to be mean, but
No, that makes total sense. So like we're talking really about exit plans. If you, because if you're 22, now is a great time to think about what's going to happen when you're my age at 52.
Because every 22-year-old has that foresight, by the way. Like,
all of them, right? Yeah. Like that's part of being 22. All right, so let's say 32. By 32, you've been beaten up by life enough to know
there you go.
that you should be planning something. But at whatever point you are in your business, unless you're planning on handing this over to your kids and 100% surely that they want it, that's another big thing. A lot of these businesses that are closed, the kids just don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Like, Dad, I don't want your plumbing supply business.
You work too many hours.
I want to be an artist.
Yeah.
I want to be underwater basket weaving, or I want to be a Russian medieval history major.
No. They want to be a content provider and an influencer.
An influencer. That's hey, you're hitting a little close to home there, buddy.
I didn't say podcaster, because we won't go there.
But I think it's important that I like this discussion, because I don't think we think about it enough. Like, we're so into the day to day, the year to year, the month to month and all that we're not really thinking about 5, 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road. Right?
Yeah. And I think I've met so many businesses that, they've had a pattern of success and they never really took the time to like build this infrastructure. And so they get to the place, we're ready to go. And unfortunately they haven't done any of the prep work. So I'm, definitely, I would say though, on a little bit of cautionary, and this is the operations guy telling you, which is weird, but have operations in mindset when you get started, but don't make operations impede your growth. Like, focus on sales, focus on building the tools and resources to get a steady pipeline and flow of people coming in. Make sure that you do an absolute great job of fulfillment. But those are the two pieces you absolutely got to get nailed first before you start trying to build a business that you're going to sell. Like, make sure you have proof of concept. Make sure people, you actually do a quality job and that people will refer you and get that net promoter score through the roof. Now, then start building that infrastructure around it to support that. And oh man, you'll have one of the business growth opportunities is acquisition. And so if you've got someone that's doing business that you're not doing, but you've got the cash, like maybe you can look at buying them out and, hey, can I take your processes and can I go incorporate what I'm doing? And then, oh my gosh, there's another opportunity. Sorry, I just kind of went a little tangent.
No, I like that a lot. And it's funny because you mentioned Cody Sanchez earlier, and Cody is like, that's her jam is really buying small businesses.
Yeah.
And so if you're not following her content, definitely somebody to kind of keep an eye out because she's great at what she does. She's interesting to listen to. And we're not here to talk about let's sell your business, right? And right. You may decide not to do that, but so you're saying basically you can be hindered by focusing too much on operations. Go into that a little bit more.
Oh yeah. Well, you said you're a perfectionist. So, when you sit there and you're like, oh, I got to get this thing perfectly documented. Yeah, that's going to take a lot of time and energy away from what you're supposed to be doing. The other side to it is, people want to like create SOPs for every job and every position. And that's too burdensome. I mean, you need to have the cash flow in, you need to have, social proof going, you need to have your website up, you need to have all these other elements in place before you start trying to document it and structure it in such a way that's going to be repetitive. Because that's the other challenge is when you create something that is a machine, that machine is just going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. And if you've got bad inputs or you've got bad systems in place, it's just going to create more of that. So, getting stuck in the operations and like, oh, I need to do this. Maybe get on the phone and sell. Get a backlog going. Okay, now you've got a backlog. Great. Now you've got the cash and the work coming in. Get your checklists in place and get those in order. Or like you said, seasonally, if you're going to get into this business, work as hard as you can during the summer, earn as much cash as you can, and then look through your notes and go, okay, why was this so hellish, or what was so hard, or where did we mess up? Take notes during that season, save it for the season that's slow, and then go through and then build those systems and fix all of those holes that you had.
I like that a lot. I think you point out, we're kind of walking down this concept, which is really prioritizing where you need to prioritize, but those priorities will change. There's this whole concept of multitasking, which is a complete myth. Multitasking doesn't exist.
Right.
You can task switch. That's the opposite of multitasking is task switching. And that can be on a micro level or a macro level. And we're talking really on both, right? Like seasonally, it's a macro level because you may do certain things during the busy season and be able to either fix or adapt or plan for in the lower seasons. And then the micro is like, what are you doing day to day? How are I've talked to employees. I've talked to the front desk person. I've made some phone calls. I've worked on email nurturing. I'm, all of these different things, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of it.
Yeah. And I think, I definitely feel like business owners are, when you're starting off, like they know the ins and outs of the business. They care about the business. They're passionate about it. And they're probably really great salespeople. Like they're good closers. But there comes a point in time where like even your own marketing or your all of that, like, why are you doing that? Like there's other people that could do this that you could pay that will build that, set that up and execute. And then go focus on the other pieces that you really enjoy. I mean, especially if you're, I've met people that are absolutely passionate about detailing and they charge, a few $100s an hour and they're fast, they're efficient, they're passionate for what they do. And you're like, you own the company. Why are you still doing the cars? Because they love it. They're like, when else am I going to be able to sit in an Aston Martin and, touch the car and get to do this stuff? Or, I'm really passionate about the details of getting in there and like they enjoy it. Great. Set up everything else then to be done by somebody else. And so then, when you show up to work, you're putting 6 hours in and billing at that rate. I mean, gosh, how exciting is that? You're making serious cash, and then everybody else gets to do everything else that you don't want to do.
Yeah, we talk about that. We've done a couple of podcasts or a bunch of podcasts with my friend Grant Menard, who runs a very successful shop and also does consulting. But he calls it it's basically a 3-column list, which is the things that you absolutely love doing, the things that you do but prefer not to, and then he calls it the F this, the F that column, right?
Yeah,
so anything that's in the F that column, those are the first things you have to get rid of. And for a lot of people, I think sales is a big one. I think a lot of people either are not trained for it, they don't like it, they don't understand how it works, or whatever, or which is fine if you just don't like it. So to your point, you want to move yourself out of everything except for that first column. And it can be a really long process.
Yeah, it is. And like you were saying, different seasons require you to do different things, and then you're wearing multiple hats. And so yeah, just, I don't know, the business owners that are going to succeed, they understand, okay, this is my GSD list, for the season of life. Okay, then I need to take care of these things and make sure they're done. But then other seasons, maybe they can trust other people to take some of the stuff on. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, what else do you have to offer?
What else?
That's terrible. That's a terrible way to say that. Anything else you want to talk about that we could bring value to kind of some of this stuff? I think that we've touched on a lot of it.
Yeah, I think we've done quite a bit. I do want to throw out there, if anybody needs help with this or wants to talk to an operations person and, might be intimidated or unsure. Usually I do a 30-minute thing, but I'll give you guys a link. So, I'll do an hour with someone. Bring everything that you've got. Like, let's just chat, no obligation. And let's have a conversation about what that looks like. And, if I can help you, great. If I can get you other resources or connections that you need and just help, because I'm very passionate about small businesses. I really think they're key to our communities. And, I have a newer car. I like to keep it cared for. And so that's something that we pay for and I appreciate it. So detailers in the world, thank you. You're doing the Lord's work there and keeping it, because I can't do it myself and I don't want to do it. So I want to preserve the value of my car, and it's nice that there's other people that can do that work. So.
Right, you said it right. I don't want to do it. Right, that's you could probably learn how to do it, but it's something you don't learn, which is the backbone of our business and our industry. Is we provide a service that anybody, a lot of people can figure out eventually, but we want the people that can afford to pay us because they don't want to do it. And there's, that's name any service. And that's pretty much every possible service we known to man. But
it's funny when you meet professional services people that are like painting their fence on the weekend. I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, just go work an extra hour and hire the guy down the street that does this professionally.
Well, as a guy that currently has about 25 inches of snow in my yard that I have been moving myself, I totally but even guys like Dan Martell, he talks about there are certain things that he and his wife enjoy doing.
Right.
And so there are certain, and I actually don't mind getting out on, I'm a nerd. I'm out on the tractor moving snow.
Okay.
And so, but it's something, yes, I could pay someone else to do it, but I don't mind doing it. And it kind of gets me out into a little bit of sun here in the middle of winter.
There you go.
Yeah. So, but to your point, it's, you are somebody that actually does pay for detailing services. So I appreciate that. This has been really good. I think it's succinct. I think it really is helpful. And so, guys, reach out to Joshua. Where do they find that information?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, thinkadaptbuild.com. Or if you can remember my name, I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a huge footprint there. I'm easy to find. And I'd love to just help people, have a conversation, see what I can do to support them in any way.
That's awesome. Thanks, Joshua. I hope you have a great day.
You too, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Head over to detailersroadmap.com and get your one-stop success solution today.